Hello, everybody, and welcome to another financial show with myself and Meten. I'm Gary from Interactions, and you are
I'm a 10 from Plutonic Planes.
beautiful. Now,
Big
now we have been doing monthly forecasts, and we missed a month or so. But what we're now going to be doing is slightly different. We're going to be kind of doing quarterly forecasts, and Meten will explain that in more detail in a little while. So this isn't just for 1 month, this forecast, this is for a short period. So Meten, would you like to explain to everybody what we'll be looking at and why?
We're going to be looking at, for everyone listening, we were doing financial forecasts prior, but we were highlighting specific monthly dates that we thought were of great significance. We're shifting to looking at it in such a way where we look at it quarterly, seasonally through the year. So we're going to begin this episode with doing the winter quarter. And what that means is it means the beginning of winter solstice, December 20th, to the ending of winter solstice, and so that would be the beginning of spring. So this forecast will be for December 20th to March 20th. And we're starting it here. Today is January 11th. So we're starting it a little ways through. And that way we can also kind of summarize what's happened so far. Maybe begin with a little summary of what's been going on. And then describe what we have went over in other videos when with our key dates in our videos with Tarot by Isabella, the Celestial Trine group insights we've been doing, and also some of the earlier videos that we've been doing on the financial that Gary and I have been doing. And we'll give sneak peeks for spring, summer, and fall quarter. Well, just a little sneak peek on it as I've already looked at all the charts, but none as in depth as the present chart, obviously, because that's where we're at, and we want to kind of see where the energy's going. And Gary's going to add his really deep research and insight about the markets and the commodities markets. I'll in, I'll add some insight from the digital crypto markets, and we'll both address um, the bond markets as well as the other markets. Anything
Beautifully
to add
put.
to that here?
Yeah,
Nothing else,
beautifully
but
put. So, summarize where we've been since kind of December coming up. Volatile would probably be the word, but in a good way, because what we've seen in particularly precious metals is silver finally breaking the shackles that it's had for far too long. And it's still a manipulated metal. The markets are still very much manipulated, but the big banks are losing control of what's going on. And this is key to moving forward, I think, for this winter period where we're going to be seeing more and more of this volatility in an upward motion in price discovery. So what I mean by that is that we can expect gold and silver to increase in price as we continue through January and February. The price, I
and
have no idea when we're going to get to, but and it won't be a straight line either. So we will see banks pulling back. We will see market manipulation like we saw over the Christmas period. Um, Certainly, bullion banks, and by bullion banks, I'm talking about JP Morgan and such like, HSBC, um, Goldman Sachs, Citibank, all the big players, and they work under the COMEX financial stock system and the London Metals and Bullion Exchange. And these two systems are paper fundamentally. They don't do a lot of delivery. And so the way they've manipulated the price is they've sold millions of tons of silver in a day to make the market appear to be very fluid and dynamic, when in actual fact, the paper that they were selling to each other didn't actually represent physical stocks. So they were creating a fraud and so able to keep the price down. And what we saw over Christmas were was the big split between East and West, if we call it that way, because there's new players in town at the moment who have been building up their portfolio and actually dealing in the real stuff. And I'm talking about the Shanghai Metals Exchange. Um, I think it's Qatar as well has just got into silver as well, and they smelted a massive bar of silver, absolutely huge, and the weight of it represented um, something to do with their nation, or whatever it was. But we're getting the Eastern countries involved in silver and certainly gold more so. Now, what we're finding is that the Shanghai Bullion Exchange only deals in physical assets and not paper, as the West are dealing in paper fundamentally, and the physical is a sideline. And what we've seen over the Christmas period was huge amounts of paper silver being exchanged to knock the price down. And something that they would do normally that knock the price down to keep the price low for 2 or 3 weeks was only lasting one day or 2 days at the most, and sometimes a few hours. And during the Christmas period, we had a major thing where they actually turned the trading servers off because the price was getting out of control. So they stopped trading by turning the computers off fundamentally. That is market manipulation, if I can say it right, at its best. This is going to continue. This is the beginning of where we are at now, where silver is trading at higher and higher prices despite what the bullion banks are doing. So when we see a drop in the price of silver, this is a manipulated drop. And what it is banks are trying to get out of their short positions that they're losing money in, and trying to create money, or they're creating money out of fresh air to pay the losses of what they've got via the silver. So what do I mean by this? Say JP Morgan has shorted silver, and they could be $5 billion in the hole for this silver because it's gone up to a certain price. They can't cover that easily. So they will sell millions of bits of paper that do not relate to physical silver to drop the price. As the price drops, they will then go into the market and buy these their own paper back almost at a lower value. So the 5 billion debt has turned, say, into a 2.5 billion debt. They will then overnight go into the reverse repo, which is a bank funding system that makes sure that banks don't crash and can cover their debts overnight, and borrow the money from the reverse repo to cover the debts. This money is created by the Federal Reserve, and during the December period, over $40 billion of credit was created out of fresh air and given to the banks so that they didn't go broke. So the shorts in silver and the prices were going down. The Federal Reserve underhandedly was making sure that the major banks didn't collapse by giving them money that it created out of fresh air, which debases the dollar. So that's kind of where we are at the moment as we stand today with silver. Meten, have you got anything to add to that?
Just an interesting philosophical reflection on that. In medical astrology, we know that silver is ruled by the moon, and the nature of the moon is such that the moon is what translates the energy from all the planets in the zodiac to all the other planets because it moves quicker than any other planet. So the moon, as it moves, it's kind of paying each planet in a way. It's kind of like the messenger that, almost like Mercury in a sense, but the moon, it moves so fast that its movement is actually needed to be that way, and it's almost like a metaphor for the way money works, or at least the way paper money works, right? And we're always going to have some form of money that needs to, the nature of money is that it needs to move, it needs to go from here to there, from here to there, and that's its major essence. That's what it needs to do. And so, but at the same time, we've always had, as China, as your example with China is, there's always been, for the most of history, an attempt to link an equivalence with the use of paper or whatever monetary form there is with its true value. So with how much gold it stands for, or actual silver it stands for, or other metals. And so the nature of silver in itself, the way it's manipulated, at least in the US economy, is very natural to what it is. But it's very interesting because China, your example of the way China utilizes its markets is it does not make money out of thin air. It likes to use equivalences of real value, or at least it's doing that today. And the real interesting thing is that China has Aquarius on its ascendant. And right now Pluto's in Aquarius. And Pluto's not allowing for any type of fraudulency in relation to its energy. So whatever Aquarian planets or charts or houses that in all the countries, in whatever area that Pluto touches, it is going to authenticate that form of exchange or form of dealing. And so it's very fascinating that China is being very, very matter of fact and very clear with its economic use of silver and gold. And it has Pluto on its ascendant. It's almost like it's doing what it's supposed to do. It's authenticating its appearance in the world and how it utilizes its economic resources and markets. That's really fascinating because I'll go into that a little today, how not the planets, but the particular countries that are on the world stage right now, right? The BRICS nations, those are 6 particular nations. The United States, of course, as the kind of, policeman of the world that it's been for a while. Certain European countries like Germany and the UK have been in the news. And then, of course, certain Asian countries, obviously China, India, Iran. We'll go to the Middle East, we go to Iran, and et cetera, et cetera. And these are all planets that have significant planets represented in the signs of either Aquarius or Aries. In Aries, of course, we have the Aries vortex happening, and in Aquarius we have we have Pluto there for the next 20 years. And of course other countries too, like Venezuela, that are in the news, as well as Greenland, as strategic points of both economic and territorial areas that are necessary for either protection or attack, related to what it is in the markets and what it is in just war and how war stands. And But I don't want to go too far into that. I'm just sharing what Gary said because I think you were very clear, Gary. The way we're starting off this winter of 2025, 2026 is with the cracks in our Western markets. The cracks are beginning to show as to how we organize our economies and how we organize our markets are very, very sketchy and very fraudulent in the sense that we're covering, silver bets when silver goes to its correct value. The banks and everyone has to they have to do all these things to cover up what they're hiding, and this can only lead to what Gary already spoke about in our earlier conversation, that this is going to lead to bailouts like we saw in 2008, 2009. And are we headed for a recession? Probably not this year, but it looks like we're headed into a very similar experience as we had in 2007, 2008, 2009 in the United States with certain bubbles kind of blowing. But that's later. That's later on. But for right now, with what you said, Gary, like you just made it kind of crystal clear to everyone how different countries are managing the value of silver and how it's being utilized in the markets. And obviously, that means that if they're controlling the silver markets here in the West, then the true value of silver is something that, well, we can never really see because there's so many aspects of it that have to be controlled, and the banks have to be, certain exchanges have to be covered, and right, it's, I don't have the correct
Yeah, yeah,
wordage, but it's not, silver is not something that can be easily just like the moon. We see this, what looks like a hologram in the sky, and it appears to shift over a period of 28 days to a point where we can't see it at all, and then it's like at its strongest point where it's like a sun in the middle of the night sky. It's a very, if you reflect on it logically, it's just a very strange phenomenon. This light that appears in the sky and then goes away and then comes back, and then it's like a heartbeat in the sky almost. It's just a blinking light. If we fast forward our night reality, it's like a blinking light in the sky. And what do blinking lights do? They create a rhythm, they create a pace, they create a cadence that controls our nervous system. And it's almost like this kind of timing kind of clock. It's almost like a clock in the sky. And the sun appears that way too, of course. I mean, you have darkness and then you have the light for half of the day. Darkness, the light, and it repeats and it repeats. But the moon is a very interesting clock phenomenon because it's something that glows and disappears at a different pace than the sun does that. It's fascinating. Anyways, I got
yeah,
too
yeah,
crazy.
yeah. No,
Okay, so
yeah,
what any reflections on that, Gary? And you want to
yeah,
summarize what we can
y-
expect for there?
yeah. So when Meten talks about the Aries vortex, we're fundamentally talking around the 19th stroke 20th of February for that date. And we have covered that in previous shows, particularly with Isabella. So there's a lot going to be happening during this period for sure. Now, we're still got to get to that stage because we're still, early January, a third of the way into January. What we're seeing currently with the silver market, and we're going to concentrate on the silver market particularly, because I think this really does highlight the shenanigans of the financial market that's gone on. China is no longer exporting silver to the Western nations unless it's under license and okayed by the Chinese government. That's huge. India no longer values its silver at Western prices. India has decoupled itself from the COMEX pricing via paper and gone to the same pricing system as the Shanghai Gold Exchange, the physical. Now, why is that important? Currently, and at certain periods in time over the last week or two, there has been up to a $22 difference in the paper price of silver to the physical price of silver where you can guaranteed to get a delivery. We're talking big players here. We're not talking about us little, you know, the the buyers like us, the retail buyers. We're talking industrial buyers here. That's a huge margin difference. Going up to December on the last quarter, a third of all the physical stocks held in the Shanghai Stock Exchange vaults was taken. A third of all the physical gold held in the Shanghai trading vaults was taken. We don't know what's been taken so far up to this quarter of their recording because of their reporting, sorry, because they haven't reported that yet. But it's very likely even more silver has gone physical. That means there's a huge shortage. I know that India, during the early December period that we're talking about, actually shut down its trading because it could not guarantee getting hold of physical metals for the contracts that were potentially wanted by companies. We saw, I think it's a couple of days ago, JP Morgan doing some real dark shenanigans on silver. Andy Sheckman spoke about this the other day. And so this comes from Andy Sheckman. JP Morgan had they they were fined, I think, $1 billion for market manipulation of silver. Not sorry, they made $1 billion and were fined $920 million for market manipulation. So that they were given an £80 million bonus for market manipulation, but still allowed to control the silver market and still allowed to hold physical silver in the vaults. That's how corrupt the system is. Now, JP Morgan holds physical silver in their vaults. What they did recently is they moved the the silver physically from, or didn't, accountancy wise, they moved the physical silver from one vault to another vault. The physical silver appears to still be on the books, but the physical silver moved to a different vault is not for sale and it's not for consumption for anybody. But the books still show it's there. This is market manipulation and it's given a false account of how much physical silver is available. Now, I believe the reason why JP Morgan were allowed and have continued to be the custodians of silver and the market manipulation fundamentally of is because they are the suppliers to the military industrial complex of silver, which is why they hold silver shorts. Silver used in weaponry is not accounted for anywhere. So when you look at the main silver usage charts from the official silver market, there is zero usage in military weapons. And certain weapons can have between 1 and probably 14 kilos of silver in, depending on what kind of weaponry they are, which is a lot of silver. And so JP Morgan, I believe, has been holding these shorts, as in saying they still hold this silver in paper, but the physical silver has gone to weaponry. And that's why they've been controlling the markets for so long and manipulating it. The problem is we've got to the stage where there's so little silver that car manufacturers, computer usage of silver, industrial usage, non-weaponry, solar panels, and Samsung have come up with a design of a new battery that takes a lot of silver. This new electric battery can go into electric cars. I think it's a fraction of the size, a fraction of the weight. It charges in a fraction of the time, like 15, 20 minutes to full charge, and will power an electric vehicle for at least 600 miles. But it takes a lot of silver. The physical silver is not there anymore to do this industrial work. Industry is realizing this. And so part of the price rise of silver currently is industry panicking, realizing that if they don't physically have silver in their stock rooms, in their own personal vaults, that manufacturing of what they will be doing will be stopping. Silver in solar panels apparently has already been cut back. So does that mean that the new solar panels coming out will be as effective as the old ones? Probably not. Does it mean they'll last as long? Probably not. This is huge because the industrial use will cause the price to escalate and go up and up and up. And the banks will continue via the paper market of the West to manipulate it down to try and balance their books enough so the Federal Reserve can keep bailing them out via the reverse repo at night times. Banks are not lending each other silver anymore. Banks are very reluctant at the moment to lend each other money to bail each other out at the moment because the trust in the system's gone, because they're all aware that they've got a noose around their neck and they're standing on the trap door and they don't know which bank's trap door is going to open first and how it's going to affect all the banks around them as the contagion goes. So it's really, really interesting. Now, India decoupling from the Western COMEX could be seen as the BRICS nations, as Meten spoke about, consolidating their physical assets and their manufacturing potential and abilities. China certainly has vast silver amounts that are not part of the Shanghai Metals Exchange. And China, I think, smelts or produces around 80% of all silver. America, just this last week, announced that they're now going to be building a big metal smelting factory with billions and billions of investment going into it. But the problem is America needs to have something called doré, which is rough cast silver and you know, so there'll be it's almost like iron ore. You can't get iron ore isn't iron, it's the ore, and then it has to be smelted down to create the iron. Well, gold and silver and other metals are exactly the same. The miners don't clean everything up. They produce a sludge or a slurry or a doré bar that is sold on, that is then turned into the clean product afterwards. China has been buying it directly from Venezuela and other countries, bypassing all the systems, and they've been doing that for a good year or two. America's just twigged that they're doing that in their backyard. Makes a lot of sense for in Venezuela. Not only do they obviously have oil, they have silver, gold, and lots of minerals. If America does not secure South America's resources and that of potentially Greenland on its doorstep, then America could be in the position where it has no access to the amount of materials needed to keep America manufacturing just the basics needed. China already has that set up. The BRICS nations already have that. The West is behind. I was listening to another guy talking about mines and simple, just create more mines. He said it takes between 8 and 12 years to get a silver mine up and running to the point in which it's actually producing silver. And because the silver price has been kept so low, nobody has wanted to put in the collateral to start a silver mine because it's not been worth it financially. Now it is, but we're still 10 years behind fundamentally more silver coming into the market. It's a real pinch point at the moment and one that's going to cause massive, massive problems within industry. Say, for instance, if a factory shuts down for 1 week, it could cost them, say, $1 billion. Does it really matter how much silver goes to before that factory will buy it? No, the factory or the industrial usage, they will pay whatever it takes to keep their factories running, and the price of silver will not matter. They need it, they're going to buy it. And so us as private investors, us that have got a few coins or whatever it is we've got, that means that that coin is going to become more and more valuable, and it's only going to go one way. How high it goes to, I have no idea, but certainly we're very close to coming up to, with VAT on our coins in England, to the £100 mark. Currently, coins are around £92 to £95 per coin for Britannia coins. Many of the bullion dealers don't have any stock. It could be that in February, when the Aries vortex kicks in, that we might not be able to buy silver anymore because the big boys have come in and the panic's hit, something's hit the fan, and oh my God. And then we're going to see a silver price run like you cannot believe. So, with that, Meten, I will leave it to you to either any other thoughts on that or potentially show a chart to the people so we can actually describe and show them what we're talking about.
Thanks for that, Gary. That was really detailed. I'm gonna add some thoughts to it and then show the chart. A couple of thoughts. I've been talking locally on the ground here in the United States with bullion dealers, trying to get a sense of what is happening with the silver markets here locally. And what Gary said is pretty exact with what's happening. A lot of the local businesses are, not all of them are aware of the shortages that are coming or worried about the shortages that are coming because they're going to buy silver at whatever cost, whatever's needed. But independent, like those who do jewelry, for example, jewelers, for example, independent jewelers are kind of worried. I've talked with them for a while, and of course they're in concern over the price of silver and gold. Like, how are they going to make rings and etc. jewelry for people with the rising costs? It's obviously going to change the way they're doing their business. As far as manufacturing businesses, some of them are already compensating. We have copper being replaced with stainless steel in a lot of cases in terms of housing and buildings and certain car manufacturing. So they're compensating for it in a way that's kind of disturbing, because if you're using steel instead of copper, or steel instead of silver, that's a degradement of the quality of materials that are being utilized, and that's a degradement of what kind of tech that we're using and applying. And Gary mentioned this in terms of AI, which is interesting as well. And I haven't investigated this, but part of what the Aries vortex is calling attention to, Neptune representing the vision and the dream, and Saturn representing the hard, fast reality check. How much, can we really create this Neptunian vision if we don't have the silver or the gold or the metals or the materials, right? And so part of this reality check is how the elite's vision is coming along. And we know their vision is an AI vision, right? How well are their new products working or not? And so we've known for a while, that the Tesla, the electric cars. You know, it's a new form of tech. You know, well, it's not AI technology, but it's close. It's still there's has layers of AI technology in it. And then here, especially in California, we have the Waymo cars, which are the driverless cars, which is and there's already a lot of and then we have of course this relates to employment, and usually in times of economic change and for example the last big economic kind of breakdown was in 2008 2009, and during that time you have people losing jobs in certain industries as new industries come into being. And so it used to be that one of the industries that people easily just find work in is to be a taxi driver. And at 2000, 2009, we saw the rise of Lyft and the other kind of more controlled forms of taxi. A new development, right? And how we're using ways to get around. Uber, yeah, Uber is what I was thinking. Uber and Lyft. And so that's been doing well for a while. And those are easy segues for people, when they lose their jobs or decide to shift to a new industry. And now we're not having that option anymore. As these Waymo cars become more and more common, these pretty much AI cars become more common in cities in the United States and possibly spread to other suburban areas, what can occur is that we can see that it's not an easy segue to some other field of making money, some other career anymore. Because this vision of, at least for the cars, Tesla cars, Waymo cars, that's an AI vision that looks successful right now. There are other AI visions, of course, like the companies for design, computer design work, and those, I don't know how many of those will last. I mean, we're coming to a time just like in 2008, 2009, where the bubble of AI is going to pop, and there will only be certain companies and businesses that actually make it through, that have successful AI products. And what they utilize, what minerals and metals they utilize will be significant as well. And it's not just the metals and minerals. I've talked about this in my other videos that AI requires a significant account of water usage, water that's usually for human beings to consume. And we've already been concerned, there's already been climate concerns about water with extremes of environmental shifts. And I'm going to show in the chart, in the winter chart for the winter solstice, I'm going to show how, because of certain aspects with certain planets, that we are going to see more and more, and many have talked about this, but we're going to see many more extremes relative to the territorial environment. Some environments will see extreme drought, while others will see extreme, flooding or moisture. And then we have the fogs that have been talked about for the last 6 months to a year in California, especially. The fogs that just kind of linger in the night. And these extremes are given to the Aries vortex, because the Aries vortex is Neptune and Saturn. And Saturn is cold and dry, and Neptune is water, it's moisture. And so we have these two extremes at the Aries vortex. And so for a while, with the perfection of this Aries vortex, and as it continues, as Saturn moves away from the Aries vortex and Neptune is there allowed to linger, what we're going to see is for 2026, and especially this first a quarter of winter, we're going to see more and more of these extreme storms where you have extreme flooding come in. And that happened all over California in the recent storms we had in December, which was the beginning of this particular quarter. And there's a mirror game we're playing here, because it wasn't by accident that I'm bringing up the point that the moon rules silver. What I'm saying is that the environmental factors are a reflection of the economical factors. And as Gary points out so succinctly, the extreme movements of silver and the attempt to control it is like trying to control flooding, you know, too much water in an environment and it taking over. And so certain, you know, things have to take place in order to contain that water so it doesn't get too high. This level doesn't get too high. And water as is an important, probably the most important commodity of life. One of the most, the air and water, of course, being the two, just like silver and gold. And silver being something that is so important in every aspect of our being. I mean, we have every industry is connected to the need for silver, whether it's based on medical products or the car we drive, to keeping our health, to the things we use every day in our life, the basic utensils made of silver or some, form of metal. The degradement, right? They used to be, right? That's why it's called silverware. It used to be pure silver and, it's degraded. Now we know it's a mixture of an amalgam of different metals. And so this is a really important kind of analogy I want to make, that as we observe the weather in our everyday life, that's the fluctuations, the extreme fluctuations we're experiencing in the beginning of 2026 is a mirror of the fluctuations we're going to be seeing in the economic markets and that we are seeing. And whether people have accepted this or not, and I talk to a lot of people, and you don't really see recognition when you bring up silver and gold. You don't see, people are stuck in their own markets. They're like, I'm looking at the stock markets, I'm looking at the corn markets, the soy markets, the crypto markets. They're looking at all these other, fascinating, interesting markets, and they all got their money in this market or that market, and they're going for their market. You know what I mean? Like almost like they're betting on Sunday for the correct their favorite football team to win. They're playing these markets like they're playing favorites. And I'm sorry, but they're lost. They're lost in a vast sea of confusion and conflation, because the facts that Gary is defending these points is very clear. And Gary hasn't even said it, so I'm going to say it. We are in a commodity cycle. It is all about silver and gold right now. And the reason it is because everybody knows we're shifting the way we utilize money. There's a big financial shift occurring because the old system is dissolving. Neptune is dissolving it, and Saturn is reality checking it for what it really is. Whether there's real value there or not. And what we're looking at is the core value of any financial system, and that's its metals. It's copper, it's silver, it's gold, it's and that's the bottom fact right now. I think that people are not understanding. And so no matter how much you mention silver and gold, people are still like, well, the stock markets, these stocks, these companies. But what Gary is saying is underscoring and nuancing here is that the existence of these banks, the continued success of these companies and these resources we need for everyday manufacturing, the root of that is our gold and silver, our metals, our copper, our steel. That's where we have to look right now. And that's what it is. I don't want to go out too much further, Gary. I'm kind of standing on your shoulders right now.
No, brilliant. Carry on.
Because it's the point, and I don't think people are getting that. And I'm going to make that clear even further with the charts, because we're all looking at these different markets and we're expecting this, okay, in my market, I got the number, I got the ticket, let's see if my number's called, right? If my market goes. But I don't think people are getting it. Like, all these markets have value. Yes, crypto has, well, imaginary value, and like these other markets have their value, right? Obviously corn and soy, these are products, these are physical, earthen products, and they all have their value, but they all have their value at their time. There's a time for everything. And we're not in a period of time right now where we're looking at the surface. No, there's a whole restructuring taking place, and it's happening from the bottom up. And what is in the bottom? What is in the underworld? Where do these minerals come from? They come from the underworld. They come from the earth. You know, these gems and these metals and these oils, they all come from the earth. Where it's we're restructuring from the seed point right now. And if people don't want to look at that, they're going to miss the patterns of what's occurring, and they're going to miss the cycles and how they're working, because it's all happening in the foundation. And so if we can see what's happening with our utilization of these metals and minerals for our daily manufacturing of reality before we even get to the markets, if we're not doing that, then we're missing the ship, missing the boat, missing the raft. We're floating. And where's the ground? Saturn will bring in the ground February 20th. What we'll see is we'll see an extremes in the markets. It'll either be upswing or downswing relative to where we're at that time period. But there's so much happening around the Aries vortex. It's not just the perfection of Saturn and Neptune on February 20th. It's the eclipse occurring on February 17th. It's the movement into the year of the fire horse on February 17th. It's Mercury going into retrograde a week later on February 26th. And I have even more stuff that I've added to our recent chats on key dates. No, that's it. Well, there's also Mars square Uranus, which is massive shock, violent, volatile shocks of the markets. And that's just a week after the Aries vortex. And the next turning point will be, and I'll show the chart just so you guys can get the whole picture of the winter. But I want to add one more thing, is this date I didn't catch until recently. And this is coming up quick, and this is right after the big kind of 7-day date that I picked for January 20 to the 27th that Gary and I recently went over with Isabella on the Pluto kind of gateway where all the planets are going to go through. And that's going to be February 5th. So February 5th, Saturn is going to oppose the September 21st eclipse point. It's going to be in Pisces at 29 degrees, opposing that September 21st degree at Virgo, 29 degrees. And that's right up, snuggling close up to the Aries vortex. It's not exactly at Aries 0 degrees, but it's right there on teetering on the edge of it. So it's very significant.
You say February the 5th?
Yes, February the 5th. And so that's a very significant date for the cardinal cross of Aries, Cancer, and the other two signs, which is Capricorn, and the opposite of Aries is Libra. So that's the cardinal cross right there, and that is a very significant point. So on February 5th, it's like after an earthquake. An eclipse is like an earthquake. And so it always has its aftershocks. And we know that once an eclipse hits, what the meaning, the theme, the true impact of that eclipse is not always realized in the moment. We did realize it at the time. Gary and I had predicted for last September 21st eclipse that something economic would happen with a country. And then later on, Gary was able to catch and point out that it was Argentina. Argentina had gone through a collapse and had quickly recovered with some, backdoor agreements with the United States in order to cover, whatever its losses were. And on February 5th, there will be another shakeup and aftershock, because Saturn is coming to this Aries vortex and giving a reality check, an early reality check, like what's going on here, what really happened. So something will be made clear, some aftershock effect will occur around that time, February 5th. So that's a new date I'm adding in. And 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 Gary, do you want to share anything? Maybe share some stuff in reflection, and then I'll go into the chart. I
Yeah,
just
yeah,
had
yeah.
so.
Meten said it perfectly and encapsulated what I'm saying in the more nuts and bolts side. He expressed it very well. The February the 5th one has just really hit me quite hard, and I'm getting goosebumps on this one. Now, we were quite right that we felt something huge was going to happen around the 21st of September, and it was reported that Argentina went broke on the 22nd of September. So that's a bullseye. It doesn't get any better than that. Now, if there's going to be an aftershock on the 5th of February, the United States bailed out or guaranteed via the IMF the payments for Argentina. Now, Argentina have sold all the beef and all their soya. Argentina actually sold their soya at a reduced price to China just before they went bust, leaving the American farmers not being able to sell their soya beans to China like they would normally because they got undercut. And so Trump had to bail out the American farmers as well as Argentina, even though they'd already sold all their soybeans. So you couldn't make that up. If there's going to be an aftershock on this on February the 5th, it makes me wonder, are we going to see Argentina do a double dip? Or are we going to see the ramifications of what Donald Trump did to try and sustain and maintain the South American supply lines America needs so badly that we're talking about kind of Venezuela very briefly, and we're not going to go into the nuts and bolts of that. It's just an awareness of the mineral and the requirements there. Are we going to see the aftershock of that that will lead up to the 17th and the 19th, 20th of February? We're seeing a build up of energy. It's like a tidal wave. The flood's coming. And that could be one of the key points of what we see. I'll leave it at that.
Okay, I'm going to share the chart, and I'll just share a little. So what I did is a whole sign chart for winter solstice for Washington, D.C. So for any astrologers listening, this is what I did for this particular chart. And I'll just go over a couple of notes. I know not everyone's an astrologer or wants to see necessarily the full details of how it plays out. This is just the translation. So you could see in this chart, and this is December 21st, 2025, 10:02 a.m. Washington, D.C. So this is the closest approximation I could get to winter solstice occurring. And in this chart you can see the ascendant, which is where a chart begins, right there. Sign, the rising sign on the ascendant. You see that the planet that's rising at this point in the chart is Pluto. And even though the ascendant's at 11 degrees, Pluto is just behind in Aquarius. So still in the first house. So it's the ruler. The ruler of this chart is the ruler of Aquarius, which is Saturn. And Saturn's in the second. And the second rules finances and resources. So you can see that the major theme of this particular quarter is with right there, the Aries vortex is in the second house of finances. So it's a major significant theme of this winter. You see the North Node there in Pisces. Now the North Node in Pisces will switch. It appears to move backwards through time, the nodes. And by July 26th, 27th, if I have the correct dates, the nodes will move into Aquarius. And usually when the North Node is in Aquarius, the markets go down. So we're looking at a big shift mid-year for 2026, and the market's taking a dive. And in the meantime, we're going to see volatile for winter. My forecast is that we're just going to see volatile shifts and very little sustaining capacity. So if we see markets go up, they won't linger there. They'll move, they'll go up and down. They'll continue to not have very good stabilization. And part of that I attribute to Uranus, which of course is with Pluto. You could see this triangle here. Gary, can you see this triangle
Yes,
between
I
Uranus?
can. Yeah.
So Uranus and Pluto is feeding energy into the Aries vortex. And Uranus feeds the sudden shock energy, and Pluto's like, is this fucking real? Is this authentic? Or is this bullshit? And I'll fucking destroy it, you know?
Yeah.
I shouldn't swear so much. I didn't think about that. Um, so with that, we're having these energies of Uranus going into Gemini around April as well. And so what we're looking at right now for the period of winter is a kind of shaky, volatile, up and down kind of movement of the markets. And then around the end of the winter market, around March 20th, before the beginning of spring, we're going to start to see, the paint really come off the ceiling. You know what I mean? Like we're going to see the cracks are going to be too clear. And what Gary's been talking about in terms of our manufacturing and how much silver countries have, I mean, that's gonna become crystal clear, and that'll be at the end of the winter and the beginning of the spring, because the spring is going to be so lit up because the spring is the actual kind of world point of the Aries vortex. So that point is being charged. Think about it as being charged right now, like batteries, with both the two batteries of Neptune and Saturn, right? Already there. But once we come to March, Aries, the sun is going to go through Aries on March 20th, March 21st. It's going to go through the Aries vortex. And that's going to get charged by all that energy that's already been lingering there. And so whatever is happening is going to be exposed. It's going to finally become really clear to a lot more humans of what's going on and many are going to be pissed.
Yeah. I got the analogy of a heart, defibrillator. So when someone's having a heart attack, you charge up the thing and the paddles are in your hand, and we're going to see the paddles going on, and then we're going to get that button pressed, and we're going to get a jolt like you've never seen before, and they're not going to be happy about it. Is
No,
what
no,
I.
it's gonna be, yeah, it's a huge wake up call that's coming, and people are gonna feel it because the explosiveness of the nature of fire, which is the Aries sign, right, and revelations coming forth, and just a bunch of volatile signatures of like up to 8 planets, including Chiron in Aries, around the April 10th to the April 17th date, which we already covered. It's going to be building up for that. So what we're looking at is just a blow off the top spring, a winter building and a blow off the top spring. And then summer, I had some notes for summer. Let's see. Summer, they're gonna create a big movie. There's gonna be a big spectacle. You know what I mean? To cover kind of all this up. There's gonna be it'll probably be war. It'll probably be war spectacles, But there'll be all kinds of big shows and celebrations to cover up like very, very hidden volatile energies. Mars is gonna square or conjunct Neptune sometime in the summer. The sun's gonna square Neptune, and yeah, summer. So much is happening. Jupiter's going to go into Leo on June 19th. Chiron will go into Taurus. Yeah, summer is like a big party. A big barbecue. Bring your popcorn. Bring your steaks. You know what I mean? Because the skies are going to be full of lies.
Yeah.
But always remember that like there's always the smoke screens and there's always what's happening behind the scenes. And I think Gary is really brilliant about clearly pointing out what's happening behind the scenes in terms of manufacturing and what's really happening in terms of our foundational economics, our material realities, what's really what is creating our everyday life, what resources we have, and what resources are diminishing, and how that will later affect businesses, economies, markets, countries, banks. In fall, should I even touch on fall? I mean, the only thing I have to say for fall is, well, let me add real quick. It's nice to know the Mercury retrograde dates because that's the time to really kind of sit back and just review things and relax and not get caught up with the show. And those periods will be March, late February, March, and the other date's going to be um, August, late July. Most of August will be Mercury retrograde, and that'll be the eclipses too in August, and then in October, October 7th, 2nd, October 2nd. And those are the periods where all we can do is watch the show, and kind of review and reflect how we're handling our resources, and how we're handling our Aries Vortex vision. Gary, you want to add to that?
Um, we are. I mean, we're obviously going to be doing shows on each quarter, so we're not going to go into any more depth than that. The Celestial Trine Part Two that we did with Isabella, Isabella clearly saw, and if you watch the show, you see what she's talking about in um, April. You very clearly see what she's talking about. As we get closer to that date, and we've seen what happens in February and come through in March, we'll have a clearer understanding, hopefully, where we can give a little bit more of an indication of where we are standing at that point, because the build up is coming, you know, and what we're seeing with the volatility now, I think, is a minor thing that's going to really hit the markets coming through the summer and certainly into the winter period. So it seems bad at the moment. It hasn't even started. It hasn't even started because the emperor will be seen to have no clothes. The manipulation, the lies, the deceit, and the downright dishonesty of the banks will become very obvious to everybody. And that will cause huge questions, not only in the manufacturing side of life, but also in the personal. Your mortgages, your debts, why everything was so expensive. And it's going to call into question everything about our lives. And these celestial events will bring this into focus very clearly, and people will be able to see this very clearly. We're just trying to give you a heads up on what's coming and where we're potentially going. So that's all I've got to say on that really at the moment regarding the charts. I do have a few other little things to add to as we finish, but chart wise, I think you nailed it, Meten. I think you really nailed it.
I'm going to say some more quick things, then I'll turn this off so we can talk freely and have our last words. Um, the public sentiment is usually the moon, which also rules the silver, and you can see here in this chart, it's kind of hidden in the 12th house. It's kind of just like in the dark, not really knowing what's going on. And you could see this is Washington, D.C., so this is the United States. Just because some people were asking me in the last couple of videos, like, are your reports for, every country in the world? I mean, it's for the United States vision on how it's dealing with the world. So everybody is here. Everyone's in the chart. Every country is represented here in the chart. Everyone's represented in the chart. But we're looking at the chart from the vantage point of Washington, D.C. So basically the US is the sun in this chart, and you can see it's in the 11th house, on kind of on the world stage, not the 10th house, but in the 11th, making alliances, talking to its friends, creating enemies or creating friends, or deciding who it wants to play with, what countries it wants to play with and do business with. Mercury's there along with the sun, and Venus is there too, trying to like create a pretty picture of how we're dealing with things. And um, we see this is the winter picture. This is like what the major themes are for the winter. The chart for spring will be different, summer will be different, and the fall will be different. And I've looked at these charts already, and like Gary said, things haven't even started yet. I mean, we'll probably see, and I haven't done full, and we haven't even looked at it with Isabella yet. There's going to be dates for the summer. There's going to be dates for the fall as well. We haven't even started to look at that.
Yeah.
But but as I mentioned in the last Celestial Trine video we did with Isabella and Gary here, um, you know, Gary asked me, he said, do you have anything to add in terms of later on this year? And I said, all I've got to say is October, you know. And Gary and I have been talking about October for a long time because it's a significant financial month that occurs during times of shift. And we talked about this at length last year, you know. And so I don't have too much to say other than what I had already said was that Mercury's going to go retrograde, and Venus, the ruler of our finances, is going to go retrograde, in Scorpio, in the underworld. What more can be said? You can't make this stuff up. It's like right there, literally. So I'll stop showing this chart here, and then Gary and I will have some last words, just kind of sharing our kind of take on things.
So none of this is financial advice. None of this, okay? And we're not giving financial advice out. But if I was observing what we've been talking about and seeing the price of silver climb the way it does, I would not be. Silver's got a long way to go yet. All the metals have a long way to go yet. And out of all the volatility of everything that's going on, the big institutions are going to wake up. And when the big institutions wake up, yeah, they're going to buy a load of paper, silver and paper gold. And then they're going to realize they're being stiffed. And it's going to get real fun at that point because they're going to demand their silver. These are big pension companies. However toxic BlackRock are, Vanguard, State Street, all of these, and they are fundamentally one organization, one very sick organization. They're going to jump into the silver and gold market with both feet because they're going to realize if they don't, they're going to be missing out. They haven't done it yet. That gives us the advantage because if we wanted to, we still can at a semi-affordable level. It's a solution. And I haven't changed my tune since the first show that we did, or one of my first early shows on YouTube nearly a year ago. I was talking about this then because what's happening now was always going to happen. I didn't have the foresight at that time of Meten's charts and his knowledge, and certainly didn't have the foresight and information from Isabella. But I could see from my understanding of the financial markets exactly what was going to be coming. It's now coming. We're in it now. And that's the point. We're now in it. We're in the storm. So you can do something about it. If you can, please do. And if you can't, please don't worry. Because what comes from this will be a new system, a fairer system, without doubt. Because we have many more dominoes to fall across the entire board of the geopolitical and pharmaceutical, all of that. It's all going to go down. And the money is the thing that ties it all together. And so as we see the money collapsing and the cracks appearing, it will cause huge rifts and cracks across everything we see in our lives. Be prepared for that. That's all we're saying. Be prepared for that. Something that just a little story, my last little bit of the story, and then I'll leave over to Meten for his last thoughts. A friend of mine just recently purchased a computer, a new computer, and they went into the store. They're chatting away to the guy, and the computers are on offer. They're reduced, and so they purchased a really good, high quality laptop, half price. The salesman said that the next lot of computers coming in will be a lot more expensive, and that they were not sure about the how can I put it, how many units they could get hold of in the future. I think he was aware of the silver issues and the manufacturing issues that were coming up. And so he wasn't talking tomorrow, he was talking 6 months' time. The last time we had issues in the UK and they locked us down due to the fake narrative, the first thing that went was toilet rolls. I should imagine most people in England have got at least one or two packs of toilet rolls stashed somewhere ready for the next event that could possibly happen where the shelves are cleared. It's a lot easier to purchase toilet rolls in the shop today than it would be in a few months' time when something might happen. The general public wake up and they strip the shelves of something. There we go.
And I'll add to that what I said earlier. It's if you look at again, it's just a big game we're playing. Where are we putting our value? It shifts all the time. In general, in our life, it shifts. Sometimes we play a game of Monopoly, and when you play a game of Monopoly, what has value? The paper, right? It says the little paper that says cash. If you're playing that game, it has value. If you're playing a different game, are there any games where you accumulate silver and gold? That'd be hilarious if they have games where you have little coins. I don't
There's
think so.
not. There might be a new game coming up soon about that.
I hope so. Right? That would be realistic, right? But think about that. Like we've never played as children a game that has actual like silver coin. If there had been, it would be teaching us the value of these foundational materials of manufacturing and civilization. So why would that ever occur, right?
Yeah.
So, instead we have these children's games and adult games, right? You go to the casinos like in a machine and like they make noise and money comes out. It might as well be a children's game. But what I'm getting to is like it's like we're constantly playing this game of what is it where you just what's that game where you run around and then when the music stops you sit down?
Musical chairs.
Yeah, musical chairs. We're playing with value. We're playing with what value is. We don't know what it is. It changes all the time. And so my message to everyone, just a simple point is where is the value now? Where is it in when you have a civilization restarting? Restarting its financial house working. Where would it make sense for the value to be? What has to be reassessed? What has to be fully reset? It's the true value of something. Where do you find the true value? Do you have it in some digital made up, quantified technology? Do you have it in paper, monopoly money? Do you have it in, you know what I mean? Like it's not common sense because, this is not common sense. This is a higher awareness sense. So hear what we're saying. We're not trying to sell anyone on anything. Again, this is just for fun. This is purely for fun. But think about that, consider that, reflect on that. Value is where you put it. And even beyond, the facts that Gary and I have shared for today about metals and minerals, value is really in what you feel has value to you. I mean, and that's personally in your own life. And it could be an art, something that is formed through art and created, something, things that you want to create. What kind of manufacturing materials do you need for that? Think about it in that way. Like as an astrologer, I enjoy jewelry and the planets as represented by certain gems. So I value the silver and gold because, that's what I like to utilize. So someone like me is not going to go out and buy necessarily silver and gold coins, whereas I prefer more, you know, these materials represented in jewelry. So think about that. Like how do you kind of, what are your values and how do they translate? Where do they meet? Where's the intersection between your values and, you know, what money really is, what we call money in this modern world, especially in this modern financial shift and transformation.
Yeah, yeah. Because the one thing that's very clear, our paper money is really monopoly money. There's no value to it whatsoever. And even gold and silver, there's actually really no value to it in any way, shape, or form. But man and woman need something to cling on to give something a base level. But in the future, and I don't know when, we won't be using money because money is a 3D concept. It's a control mechanism placed upon the slaves to control them and to enable the rich to play their games on the Monopoly board. And we're now seeing the build up of the game on the Monopoly board to the point in which those rich people playing the game of Monopoly and have been playing us are losing control very quickly. And something new is going to come from this. And it's not going to be deep state. It's not going to be deep state because the deep state will not have the physical means to pay for it because the deep state generally does not hold enough gold or silver anymore. They hold the paper, which is worthless. And at some point, the spell is going to be broken and people are going to realize the paper is worthless. Just as many Eastern countries went through via communism the hard way, where people would queue up for a handful of toilet rolls. They would have to queue up for their food, for their meat. They were given stamps, and the stamps became the money because the stamp represented food. I'm not saying we're going to get to that stage, but it's going to be a ride. So prepare yourselves while you can. Because I'm pretty certain the next show that Meten and I do, we're going to have seen something or things would have happened which will show us via the astrology exactly what we were kind of talking about or will guide us into something else that we will be able to say, oh my God, this is going to get really, really interesting now. So, have no fear. We're going to be looked after. But if you're prepared, it's going to be less arduous. And for goodness sake, if you do hold silver or gold, nice necklaces, rings, whatever it is that you have, do not sell it for any price until you have to. You're forced to hold on to everything you can because it will become something very, very tangible, important as we go through the year. At this point in the game, it's not even a thing that you need to be thinking about because the paper money still can purchase you something. We will get to a stage where your dollars will not buy you a loaf of bread. You'll be using wheelbarrows potentially because it's
Gary
true though.
took it to a whole new level. Forces me to like now I gotta say a couple things too, because what Gary is saying, I'm just gonna be very subtle. Like I'm not gonna be direct, but February 20th it's Neptune and Saturn in conjunction in the Aries vortex historically. That is symbolic of certain types of systems, either we being ushered into it or ushered out of it. And that's is that is that like concerning? I'll say, yeah, it's concerning. It's very concerning. And either you have or you'll be standing in lines. I mean, that's another way to put it.
Yeah,
And if you're standing in lines, that means and know that nothing is ever free. People haven't realized that yet in their life. You have to get a clue. Like everything comes with a cost, especially things that are free. So watch what you're given for free. I think in order to sign into my email and my website, I'm gonna give like a free human design. Like, it's joking, but you know what I mean? Because I want my community too. I want you guys to be in my community. So on that note, feel free to go to my website and you know share your email because what Gary's talking about is not just for every construct, it's this construct as well. How long are we going to be on this construct? And if you're a part of our community, you know, we want you a part of our community, not through a mediatory tool or agency, which is how we're communicating right now.
yeah, yeah,
So we'll leave it at that before we get too deep. I mean,
yeah.
Gary,
We
you gotta get.
will, we will, we will. And again, please have no fear on this. Forewarned is forearmed. It's going to get very rough and bumpy. But what we have fundamentally is two warring factions, and they don't care about us. But there's a third faction coming in, and both of those factions that are warring and have been playing the games for many years don't want this third party coming in, and they can't stop it. And the third party part of it really is important to us as we move forward, and we'll go into that in more depth when it becomes time. When it becomes time. But for those who've watched us a lot and watch our channels, will kind of know where we're headed with this one. So I've got nothing else to say, Meten. What about you?
That's it. Thanks so much for watching. We appreciate you guys, every one of you. Thanks for subscribing. Thanks for watching our vids. We have more coming. And yeah, we'll see you soon.
Thank you very much, everybody. Love, light, and blessings. Bye bye.